What would happen if a CEO secretly boarded a flight operated by his own airline and uncovered a truth no one else dared to speak? The sky had not yet brightened when Leon Archer arrived at the domestic terminal of Denver Airport, wearing a jacket hastily borrowed from a security guard after a luggage mishap. Gone were the tailored Italian suits and the CEO badge of Orion Skies, the airline that bore his name and carried his dream of conquering the skies. At that moment, Leon looked no different from a night shift technician, quietly passing through security with an economy ticket booked under an alias. No one recognized him. And that was the point. For months now, passenger complaints about cold service, indifference, and even abuse of power by the flight crew had begun to surface more frequently in internal reports. But what troubled Leon most was the absolute silence from upper management. "Everything's fine," they said. "Nothing to worry about." But Leon knew, when everyone says it's fine, something is probably very wrong. He didn't need another data sheet. He needed a real moment where he wasn't the CEO but just another anonymous passenger, and that's why he was here, sitting in seat 27F near the back of the cabin, by the window, where no one paid attention. The air in the cabin carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee, mixed with the soft rustling of magazines and the clicks of seatbelts. As Leon buckled in, he subtly scanned his surroundings. Ahead of him was a young couple gently shushing each other to keep their baby asleep. To the left, a businessman opened his laptop, the blue screen light casting a glare. But from behind, a soft voice, almost a whisper, made Leon pause. "I should have made it. I tried." The voice belonged to a young woman, breaking between breaths, as fragile as a page but filled with a depth of emotion that made one's chest tighten. Another voice, calm and steady, answered her. "You're doing all you can. Sometimes that's more than enough." Leon was not in the habit of eavesdropping, but something in that exchange, less complaint, more restrained sorrow, held his attention. A brief conversation between strangers, yet it awakened something deeply familiar. A sense of helplessness, loneliness, and the quiet need to be seen. Clara Morgan, 25, had rushed to book a last-minute flight after learning her mother had suffered a stroke. The ticket cost twice the usual price, but she had no other choice. Traces of tears still marked her face, and she clutched her phone like it could summon a miracle call from the hospital. Sitting beside her was Walter Hayes, a man in his 60s who had just lost his wife of 30 years. This was his first flight alone since she passed. He fumbled with a customs form, awkward in a way that evoked sympathy. They had never met, yet somehow their spirits touched at just the right time, on a flight to nowhere in particular. Leon's fingers tightened around the armrest. He hadn't expected the first people to unsettle him would be passengers, not employees. Because an airline, in the end, does not merely transport bodies from point A to point B. It carries hope, partings, and a longing to be treated as human. And if right here, in this economy cabin, the most vulnerable feel invisible, then what pride could he still take in Orion Skies? At that very moment, the rhythmic footsteps of a female flight attendant echoed down the aisle, bringing with them the first shift in the journey, one Leon never saw coming. And from that point on, nothing would ever be the same. As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, the cabin lights softened, the murmurs quieted, and in that moment, Leon Archer realized for the first time the true weight of a journey. Not in altitude, not in speed, but in the quiet stories carried beneath each bowed head. Behind him, Clara Morgan was still silently dabbing her eyes with a tissue, trying to hide the panic behind a mask of composure. Her phone buzzed. Just 4 words. "Still not awake." Clara bit her lip until it bled. At 25, she didn't have much to lean on. Working 2 part-time jobs, juggling her living expenses, she had never imagined that a single stroke suffered by her mother could shake the entire world she was building. A plane ticket that cost nearly $800. That was an entire month's rent. But her mother, the woman who raised her alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Sacramento, was now lying in the ICU. She had to get there. Beside Clara sat Walter Hayes, a man with silver gray eyes and neatly combed graying hair. He sat still, silently flipping through the pages of the customs form, then placing it back down on the tray. The motion repeated strangely, as if he were trying to find something familiar in those lifeless lines of text. From the way he looked, Leon could feel it. He was lost. This seat, on this flight, should have belonged to Eleanor, his wife, his companion through nearly half a century. But now, he had to learn to travel alone, fill out the forms alone, sign his name alone. There was no one to remind him which date to write or what the purpose of his trip was. He mumbled to himself, voice trembling, as though still speaking to her. "You always helped me with these things." Clara hesitated, then gently offered, "Would you like me to help you fill it out?" Walter looked up, eyes red, but his gaze softened. "Thank you," he said. I'm not used to doing things on my own." They were strangers, not planning to share life stories mid-flight. But in the silence and stillness of row 27, a young woman and an elderly man grieving his lost partner found solace in each other, something Leon realized no customer policy, check-in app, or business class lounge could ever truly provide. It was this kind of uncalculated, spontaneous kindness that any airline claiming to understand its passengers must hold in higher regard than profit. At that moment, Leon decided he could no longer just listen. He leaned slightly, pretending to reach into his bag so he could better see Clara's face. Her eyes were swollen but held a determined gaze. Walter sat quietly, fingers gently clutching his wedding band, his heart clearly still tethered to the one who had just passed. And Leon, CEO of Orion Skies, was no longer sure whether his billion-dollar enterprise was truly serving people like them. If his airline couldn't offer a sense of human connection to passengers like Clara and Walter, then what meaning did all his growth strategies hold? The cabin remained hushed, the engines began to hum, and as the plane lifted off the ground, the three people seated at the rear, each carrying a private sorrow, were unknowingly stepping into a journey that would not only change their lives, but alter the future of an entire airline. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed, and the first footsteps of the flight crew echoed softly down the aisle. Leon Archer had yet to take his eyes off the back of the cabin. One of the things he had once taken the most pride in when founding Orion Skies was its service culture. Touch hearts, not just serve. But theory is always beautiful until it has to live inside reality. And today, that reality was walking toward him, in the form of a tall, slender woman in her 30s, her hair neatly tied back with sharp eyes that seemed to see through the quiet exhaustion people tried to hide. A small name tag on her uniform read, Maya Tran. Maya did not wear the forced smile of someone following a memorized, "Hello, thank you, would you like a beverage" routine. Instead, her gaze swept calmly across each face, as though scanning for cracks in the mask of composure worn by travelers. When she reached row 27, she leaned in slightly, paused at Clara, and asked, "Are you okay?" The question seemed simple, but it caught Clara off guard. She didn't respond, just nodded, her eyes still red. But Maya didn't move on. She gently adjusted Clara's headrest, retrieved a thin blanket from the overhead compartment, and whispered, "If you need anything, I'll be back." A moment later, a cup of hot tea appeared on the tray table with a mint candy beside it. Clara looked at Maya without saying a word, and tears silently fell. Some people do not need to speak much to make others feel seen. Leon watched everything. When Maya reached the row ahead, where Walter was still fumbling with his customs form, she leaned down and asked kindly, "Would you like help filling this out?" Walter nodded, eyes damp. "My wife usually did this." Maya didn't pry. She simply sat beside him, uncapped her pen, and patiently guided him through each line, as if no one else on the flight needed anything. But just as she helped Walter sign the final section, the sharp click of high heels cut through the warmth like a razor blade. "Miss Tran." Maya turned. Standing before her was Tracy Kent, the lead flight attendant, the woman Leon had seen mentioned in several anonymous reports, though he had never met her in person. She stood stiff-backed, lips pressed tight, eyes sharp like blades aimed at Maya. "We are not permitted to sit during service, especially when a passenger has not requested medical assistance." Maya started to respond, but Tracy continued, lowering her voice just enough for Leon and a few nearby passengers to hear. "If you keep up with this special care routine, I'm afraid you'll never move past junior crew." Maya merely nodded, eyes downcast, no defense, no resistance. She stood, adjusted Walter's blanket, and walked back toward the galley as if nothing had happened. But Leon was different. He clenched the armrest, eyes locked on Maya's retreating figure. He had heard rumors of dedicated staff being pushed aside because they refused to play by the rules. But now, for the first time, he wasn't just hearing it, he was witnessing it on his own flight. At that moment, Leon's disappointment was no longer abstract. It had taken form, it had a voice, it had a pair of high heels echoing with pride across the floor. And right then, he understood. Maya was not the one who deserved to be evaluated. It was the very system around her that needed to be placed under the microscope. The plane landed around 8 p.m., the flickering airport lights reflecting off the aircraft's dull silver fuselage. Passengers exited one by one, their luggage wheels clattering behind them, accompanied by hurried goodbyes. But Leon Archer remained seated in row 27F, staring at the empty seats where Clara and Walter had just been. Something about this flight, not the duration, not the service, but the way two strangers had found each other, and how one flight attendant had turned the economy cabin into a small shelter from life's storms, left him restless. Behind the usual calm exterior of a CEO, Leon was angry, not because his company had flaws, but because he hadn't seen them sooner. He didn't go home. Without notice, he went straight to Orion Sky's operations tower, a 52-story glass building with the comet-shaped logo he had personally chosen years ago. His access card still worked. The night guard greeted him by his real name. Inside his quiet office, with only the hum of the air conditioning in the background, Leon sat down, turned on the computer, and logged into the internal management system, where personnel files, customer feedback, and promotion records were stored. He typed in the name now etched in his mind, Maya Tran. Her profile appeared, surprisingly simple. Nothing noted except seniority, 9 years. Performance rating, good. No infractions, no warnings. Every section Leon opened showed an exemplary employee, punctual, dedicated, no unexplained absences. But when he checked the promotion recommendations and annual leadership evaluations tabs, something strange appeared. No evaluations for the past 2 years. Instead of an error, the system read no data found. This was against company policy, which required at least one evaluation per year for every employee. He opened the review history tab and found what made his jaw tighten. Maya had applied for lead flight attendant 3 times in 3 years, and all 3 times she had been rejected for the same repeated reason. Not suited for leadership, too soft, lacks executive presence. The person who signed off on each, Tracy Kent, not once, all 3 times. Leon leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. Beneath Tracy's name were 2 others, Denise Blackwell, head of human resources, and Greg Finn, director of flight attendant training. Each time, the same review panel, the same verdict, like it was copied from a template. No dissenting opinions, no alternate views. They hadn't failed to see Maya, or worse, they had seen her and chosen to look away. What chilled Leon the most was a note within the internal system. To be reconsidered upon demonstrating actual leadership qualities. But what defined actual leadership, if not Maya quietly guiding passengers through a crisis, helping a grieving father find calm, helping a retired firefighter find his way on a solitary journey? Leon opened another tab and searched the passenger feedback database. He typed, Maya Tran. The results filled nearly 3 pages, all positive. One passenger had written, "The first time I felt someone genuinely cared for me on a flight." Another mailed in a handwritten note to customer service with a photo of Maya assisting a disabled little girl. None of these living testaments to her capability and compassion had ever been brought up in executive meetings or reports. Leon closed his eyes. In that moment, he was no longer the CEO of an airline, but the man who had once started a small charter service, who used to personally greet passengers at the gate, who dreamed of creating an airline that would bring emotion back into every journey. Shinhitu, when had that dream veered off course? And did he still have the courage to steer it back, starting with standing up for someone the system had tried so hard to bury? He didn't need more answers, just action. That very night, he made a phone call to someone he knew would speak the truth, no matter whose toes it stepped on. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the glass panels on the 50th floor of the Orion Sky's tower, Leon Archer was already present in the main boardroom, a place he rarely entered without a secretary announcing his arrival. But this time, he needed no protocol, no press team. He only needed one list, Every department head, HR executive, flight attendant supervisor, and training director who had directly or indirectly influenced internal promotions among flight attendants in the past 5 years. And at the center of that list, he ensured Maya Tran's name was not forgotten. The meeting was summoned in under 2 hours, with an emergency notice sent across the entire organization. No one knew what was happening, but once they stepped into the room, it became clear this wasn't an ordinary meeting. Leon stood next to the projector screen, with no documents, no assistants. He wore a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled up, his gaze cold yet calm, a calm that made everyone uneasy. "Good morning," he said slowly, and no one dared respond. "I took a flight yesterday, from Denver to Boston." A few chairs shifted quietly, glances exchanged. Tracy Kent sat in the front row, lips pursed tight, gripping a pen. Greg Finn sat farther back in silence. Denise Blackwell was typing something on her phone, but her fingers had started to tremble. Leon continued, "I flew incognito, no CEO badge, no first-class ticket, and I witnessed something no report ever told me." He paused, then played a recording. A voice rang out, sharp and cold. "If you keep up this emotional care nonsense, you'll never get promoted. This is an airline, not a charity." The room fell utterly silent. Leon looked straight at Tracy. "That voice sound familiar, Ms. Kent?" Tracy's face went pale, her lips moving, but no sound came out. Leon turned around and pointed to someone quietly seated in the corner. "Maya Tran, please stand." Maya, still in her flight attendant uniform, rose from the back row, eyes wide with disbelief. She had never stepped foot in this room, never dreamed of speaking before the executive board. But now, every pair of eyes was on her. Leon signaled the HR team to bring Maya's personnel file up on screen. 3 missing evaluations, 12 customer commendations hidden from the system, 3 promotion denials, all with the same remark: lacks leadership qualities. Leon pointed at the board. "Who wrote this?" Denise swallowed hard. Greg looked away. Tracy muttered, "I followed the evaluation framework." "Framework?" Leon repeated, each syllable deliberate. "What framework says kindness disqualifies someone from leadership? What framework lets you discard someone because she's not part of your inner circle?" No one answered. Leon pressed on. "Ms. Tran demonstrated competence, empathy, and true leadership on that flight. She didn't just assist passengers, she reminded this executive team of something we've forgotten, that people must come before systems." He turned to Maya, his tone softening. "And because of that, I'm making a decision right now. Effective immediately, you are appointed head of passenger experience, a new role designed to transform the way we define service." The room froze. Greg tried to rise in protest, but Leon cut him off. "And you, along with Ms. Kent, are formally under investigation for manipulating HR processes, internal favoritism, and ethical misconduct. You may begin preparing your resignations or prepare to face an independent audit." Maya stood still, eyes wide, hands trembling, not out of fear, but because, for the first time in nearly a decade, she was being seen. No longer just a forgettable flight attendant, but a symbol of change for an entire system. After that seismic meeting, Maya Tran's name unexpectedly became the new symbol of Orion Skies. Internal publications hailed her as the face of reform, and passengers began mentioning her by name in glowing feedback. But Maya knew all too well that light always comes with shadow, and those who once thrived in darkness would not retreat so easily. The calm lasted exactly 4 days, until Naomi, Maya's new personal assistant, burst into her office, trembling as she handed over a printed letter. "You need to see this," Naomi said, her voice barely steady. Maya skimmed the page, her heartbeat accelerating with each word. No sender, no subject. Just a bold opening line. "To the head of passenger experience." The word head was in quotation marks, like a sneer. The next line was blunt. "You think you're fixing Orion Skies? You're just making enemies. And when the hatred grows large enough, no title will save you. Don't think you can't be replaced." Maya placed the paper down, her eyes fixed on the last line. "Watch your back." For a moment, all sound vanished. Only her heartbeat echoed in her chest. Who could it be? Tracy Kent had been dismissed. Greg was gone from the company. But Maya knew. People like them never act alone. They were only the visible part of a much deeper system, deeply rooted and resistant to change. and she had just dared to touch its roots. Leon Archer was notified immediately. Without offering empty reassurances, he said only one thing. They just made their first mistake, revealing they exist. But the warning was not the only strike. 2 days later, during Maya's presentation on reforming flight attendant training, just as she was moving to the next slide, the main screen suddenly displayed a forged email. It contained suggestive language, implying Maya had accepted bribes from passengers in exchange for positive reviews. The boardroom erupted into whispers and speculation. Leon looked at Maya, his eyes unwavering. "Fabricated," he said calmly. "The writing doesn't even follow basic grammar." Maya remained standing, her gaze freezing the room into silence. "I don't know who did this," she said clearly, "but I do know this. Kindness doesn't need defending with words. My passengers will speak for me." Leon immediately ordered the cybersecurity team to trace the email source, but Maya knew she had to go deeper, down to the root of the problem. That night, she received a call from an unknown number. A deep, tense voice on the other end said, "You don't know me, but I know that email was fake. If you want to know who's behind it, meet me, level 3 parking lot, west side." Without hesitation, Maya called Leon. 15 minutes later, the two arrived at the nearly deserted garage. A man stepped out from the shadows wearing an old pilot's jacket, its emblem faded. "My name is Hugo Ramirez. I was a lead captain for 15 years, but I left when I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore." He handed Maya a USB drive. "This contains a recording. Denise Blackwell and Charles Finn discussing how to punish you for embarrassing the old system. They hired someone to forge the email and are still recruiting new supervisors into the old network." Maya couldn't breathe for a moment. Denise, the woman who had sat silently during her promotion meeting. Charles, a vice president who never spoke yet was always present. Leon clenched his fists. "Enough," he said quietly. "We're not going to confront them. We're going to set a trap." 3 days later, on the 18th floor, inside the internal boardroom reserved for high-level negotiations, two individuals waited in silence. Denise Blackwell, the seasoned HR director, and Charles Finn, executive vice president, the man who had quietly orchestrated every internal promotion for years as if it were his birthright. They had no idea that today, their long silence would become a weapon used against them. The meeting was scheduled under the pretense of reassessing executive structure post-reform, a perfect cover to draw them into the light. Denise wore a light gray blazer, her eyes coldly fixed on the blank projection screen. Charles, as usual, offered a slight nod and a faint, practiced smile, his hand resting on a brown leather portfolio like it held all the control. But when Maya walked in, without an introduction, without an escort, and sat directly across from them, both froze for a moment. Then Leon Archer entered, calm and deliberate, holding a small remote in his hand. "Thank you both for coming," he said, pressing the button. The screen lit up. A recording played, low and clear. "She's disrupting everything. If we let this go on, our entire control network will collapse." Denise's voice. Then Charles's voice followed. "Then create a scandal, fabricate a story, fake an email, bring her down before it's too late." The room fell completely silent. Denise shot to her feet, her face pale. "This has been doctored. Everyone here knows audio recordings can be manipulated." But Leon stood still, his eyes colder than the fluorescent lights overhead. "Wrong," he said. "The source is a direct witness, someone who once served your cause but has chosen the truth." The door opened. Hugo Ramirez stepped in. His faded pilot uniform now looked like a badge of honor. Denise collapsed back into her chair. Charles tried to speak, but no words came. Leon leaned forward, his voice descending like an aircraft on final approach. "You have two choices. 1. Resign immediately and disappear from this organization. 2. I go public, with the recordings, the documents, and the list of every name you pushed through based on connection instead of merit." Denise quietly removed her employee badge. Charles lowered his head. They didn't need time to think. They knew they had lost. A week later, the internal announcement of their resignations circulated in neutral language. No scandal, no accusations. But the entire HR team understood. An old era had officially come to an end. Leon reactivated the internal audit team, ordering a review of every promotion over the last 5 years. Those who had been sidelined for not playing along were gradually invited back to revisit their career paths. As for Maya, now settled in the calm of her new office, finally working under a title she had earned through blood and tears, she sat in quiet reflection by the glass window. When Leon walked in, she offered a faint smile. "We've only just cleaned up the wreckage, haven't we?" He nodded. "And your biggest challenge is still ahead." Maya tilted her head slightly. Leon placed a thick folder on her desk. Red-bordered, confidential seal. "They want a merger," he said. "A larger, more powerful airline. And if they succeed, your department will be the first thing erased." Maya clenched her fists, her eyes gleaming like metal in the sun. "Then they're about to find out. Erasing me won't be as easy as they think." The news of the merger between Orion Skies and North Atlantic Airways broke on a cold Monday morning while the city was still drowsy in the early fog. But the executive offices were already buzzing with endless whispers. The giant Northern airline was notorious for its ruthless operations, relentless profit optimization, and swift elimination of any department that did not directly generate revenue. In the initial memo, a chilling line read like a sentence: "Passenger experience is not part of the core growth strategy." No one mentioned Maya Tran by name, but everyone understood. She was the thorn in the side of those eager to restore the old order. 3 days later, the first executive meeting between the two companies was held at Orion Skies headquarters. The largest boardroom on the 52nd floor was packed. Maya was not invited, yet she showed up anyway, wearing a charcoal gray suit, quietly stepping into a space heavy with the scent of power and control. A few representatives from North Atlantic raised their eyebrows at her, as if she were a clerical error. Only Leon gave her a slight nod. He knew what was coming. At the head of the table sat Victor Langley, CEO of North Atlantic, a man with salt and pepper hair and a square, emotionless face, infamous for cutting 60% of flight attendants in a previous acquisition. When he saw Maya, he offered a dry, mocking smile. "I didn't expect you to be present for a high-level strategy session." Maya replied in a soft but steady voice, "I believe any strategy that eliminates what builds customer trust cannot be called high-level at all." The room paused. Victor raised an eyebrow. "The issue is, trust doesn't yield profit," he said. "Your department, no matter how much praise it receives, doesn't bring in cash." At that moment, Leon stood up. He placed 2 files on the table. "You're wrong," he said. The 2 passengers Maya directly supported on that flight, Clara Morgan and Walter Hayes, brought in 2 major investment opportunities. First, a firefighter community trust fund led by Mr. Hayes, and second, a $50 million investment from the Callaway Group with one condition: Maya Tran continues to lead our passenger experience division. Victor's jaw tightened. The others began whispering, shifting their eyes from Maya to Leon. The tide turned. Maya then stood up, her voice clear. "You can copy processes, you can redesign customer service systems, but you cannot replicate trust, because trust is not born from documents, but from people. And if you plan to turn me into a footnote in this restructuring, then I assure you, the first thing erased won't be my name, but the loyalty of thousands of passengers who chose Orion Skies because of our people." Leon smiled. He placed one final document on the table, a signed contract from the Callaway Group. "The investment is only valid if Maya Tran is appointed Vice President of Passenger Experience, and the division remains independent." Several North Atlantic reps jumped up to object, but Victor knew the game was over. "We will need to reassess the merger structure," he said through clenched teeth. A week later, the restructured announcement was released. Maya's division would remain intact, even expanding its staff. The soft processes once dismissed now formed the backbone of the new marketing strategy. Maya was officially appointed as one of the senior vice presidents, with veto power over all policies related to passengers. On her first day in the new role, Maya walked through the airport terminal and spotted a father and son pulling suitcases. The father stopped when he recognized her. It was Walter Hayes. He approached, shook her hand, saying nothing, just a look, and Maya knew every victory, every silent battle had been worth it. In the world of business, sustainable change does not come from polished slogans, but begins with the courage to face the truth, even when it's buried in the back of the economy cabin or hidden within a forgotten personnel file. Maya was not just an outstanding employee. She was a reminder that kindness, when given the opportunity, can transform an entire system. If you believe that every sincere effort deserves to be seen, then like this video, subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring stories, and leave a comment with the phrase "deserves more" to help spread this powerful message.